Good morning, beautiful people. We are live.
The sun is rising, the sky is blue. Good morning, grand risings, let's see what's new. It's that time of day for Sonia and crew. Good morning, grand risings. It's time to wake up with Sonia Poulton.
Good morning and grand risings to you. Can you even see me? Good morning. How are you this wonderful morning, Monday, the 27th of January, 2025. It's just gone 9:01 a.m. GMT. Thank you all for being here. You are so lively already in the comments and I love it. Woohoo, says our crazy bunny. Absolutely wonderful to see you all. Good morning to you all. Good morning, Dover and Dolly's mum, and Cavan and Craig and Armand and Lisa and Crazy Bunny, of course, one of our mods, and Cheryl and Mickey the monkey, listening from an A&E in Southampton. Mickey, are you okay? We're sending love. We're sending love and good healing. And good morning, Kath. She says, grand rising, you beautiful Poltonites. Indeed, 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 indeed. And how are you all? And Kathy Dando, good morning from Malta. Good morning, Kathy. Do you live there or are you holidaying there? It is absolutely insane weather out here. I just went out in the garden and like a 20-foot plus long tree part is on the ground. Like it's huge. It's more than 20 foot. Good morning, Weeman's dad and Katie and Sean and Marcuson, of course, responsible for our wonderful jingle, and Sonia, another Sonia, and Paula and lovely Merv. How are you, Merv? And Tara, good morning to you all, and Teresa and Christine and Fabile and Kitchen Politics and Robert and you name it. We're all in the house. I hope you are all well. I hope you are surviving this insane world. Hello and welcome to the show that seeks to make sense of a media manipulated world. On today's show, we will be joined by retired US Colonel. She'll be joining us to talk about our hidden world and the psychological operation known as Operation Gladio. We'll also be joined by the barefoot mediator, Jane Gunn. She's going to be helping us to thrive in turbulent times. Can't ask for more than that, right? And also Professor Richard Enos will be joining us from We Are Common Knowledge Edinburgh. They're going to be having a COVID inquiry and Richard's going to be joining me to talk about it. We'll also be looking at the second anniversary of the disappearance of British mum Nicola Bulley. Literally around about this time 2 years ago, on the 27th of January, were some of the last minutes that we knew of Nicola Bulley, and she was found 3 weeks later. More of that later. I've asked for your view. I put it out all across social media, and boy, did you give me your view, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you. We'll also be looking at Southport censorship. Oh yes, the media, the legacy media have been caught out. We knew they were censoring the story. We knew it, but they've actually been caught. And it was a brilliant catch. And I'll be talking about that more a bit later. We'll also be sort of reflecting on Trump's first week, although it feels like a lifetime now, doesn't it? And the climate and nature bill, which we talked about on Friday, has come to an end, although not maybe entirely. But again, we will look at that. We'll look at geoengineering because we have some viewer images. And in our Curious World, a new segment. And I want you to contribute to it. And really, it's just about, I mean, I just find the world endlessly curious. And so I want to look at our curious world. And we're going to start off with China's sky homes. And we're going to end with finding inner peace amidst the noise. And who doesn't want that? And as the WEF week ended in Davos, spare a thought for the prostitutes who have made a fortune, but had to sleep with globalist parasites and predators to do so. I'd rather be poor, personally. All the usual good stuff on today's show, viewer emails and live chat. Welcome to Wake Up. We do news differently around here. And you know why? Because someone had to. And good morning to you, Polly and Carol and Stephen. I hope you're all well. And talking about the storms that we are enduring, anybody got filthy windows? And I mean proper filthy windows. I've had people call me from Ireland, from Scotland, saying you should see the state of our windows after that storm. Very interesting. Tell me if you've got filthy, filthy windows, different than the usual. And right, let's start on some news before I bring in my first guest. And I think this is really curious. I'm going to bring this to the stage any second. And that is I want to talk about the media cover-up of the Southport murders, of Axel Rudakubana. And we knew it, didn't we? We knew it even when we talked about this on Friday. And we knew that when Merseyside police put out this message that the parents don't want you really to kind of talk about this in detail on social media, we all knew that we're still being handled over this story. And actually, a reporter has been caught out live, literally censoring the story. And I'm talking about Sarah Jane Mee from Sky News. And this is actually an image of her. And what was happening prior to this, she's actually going like this. I don't know, actually, let me just, so you can see me as well. She's actually going like this to the producers, to the people in the booth, to cut what the man is saying. And what the man is saying, what the guest is actually saying, is if Axel Rudakubana had been properly dealt with by the authorities, it is almost certain that what happened in Southport with the 3 little girls would never have happened. And the camera flashes back to her, and she's going like this, like cut it, don't let people hear what he's saying, that the authorities failed. And that is absolutely the media censorship, in part what we've been dealing with, an absolute complicity. And what was interesting, you don't mess around with Liverpudlians, right? And there were literally Liverpudlians. You can actually see her here again in the top picture. And there were people here, let's call them citizen journalists for want of a better description at this moment, people here telling these journalists, get out. Get out, get out, get out. And that's because none of them are relaying the story as accurately as they should. And the thing is, like I say, you don't mess with Liverpudlians. Remember what they did to the Sun newspaper. Don't try and buy a Sun newspaper in Liverpool. Ain't happening. Because Liverpudlians, when they put their mind to it, they will chase away media. And we all should be a bit like that. We should all be a bit like that. The video, I'm not playing the video. You remember I got done for playing a video the other week. And I'm damn sure I'm not giving copyright money over to Sky News. Absolutely not. So that's why I'm only using stills. Hope that's okay with you all. How are you today in the comments? How are you? Gwyneth, they are scum. Crazy Bunny loves Scousers. Complicity to the max. Kath, complete complicity. What about the father? Why didn't he do more to prevent his son from carrying out his monstrous act? Benny, no argument here, my friend. I think that the parents have a lot to answer for at this moment in time, and we haven't apparently heard from them. But yeah, it's complicity all round, of course, isn't it? We know it is. It's pretty awful, pretty appalling stuff. But don't be under any illusion that they're going to use this to clamp down on social media. They 100% are. And one of the reasons that I say that is the ever reprehensible Rachel Reeves, Chancellor of the British Exchequer, more fool us. Rachel from accounts, as they often call her, the woman who has a fraudulent CV behind her. And in fact, senior people at the Bank of England said she never had the positions that she claimed to have. Anyway, she was on BBC News yesterday. And she made a number of comments to Laura Kunsberg, absolute state asset hack. And she said it is totally unacceptable that the killer, Axel Rudakubana, went on to commit those horrific crimes, was able to access really easily on some of the online platforms such hateful material. Those companies have got a moral responsibility to take that content down and make it harder for people to access it. Nobody is saying that we want to see violent material online, right? But that's not what they're talking about. Literally, Merseyside police already set the stage. They do not want us discussing this. And they don't want us discussing this particular one because, as many people suspect, all roads lead back to people who are currently in power. Right. And what's that? David Beckham and Gary Neville at Davos sold their souls to the evil cabal. Absolutely, Mark. We talked about that on Friday. 2 people I find utterly reprehensible. But yes, just to say, they will absolutely be using Southport to clamp down on social media. We know it. The problem for them is that with social media, enabled plebs like us to gather together, to organise, and they don't like that. That creates our own power. They are rolling all the false idols out. Remember the USMK Ultra. Frankie, not only do I remember it, I'm going to be talking about something quite similar to that today. Operation Gladio, which was actually major psychological operations around the world. And healing the silences, it really is all about bend it like Beckham. Yeah, whichever way you want it. Whichever way David says, whichever way you want it, he'll do it. What do you think about that? And a brief look at Donald Trump's first week, just very, very brief. We'll talk about it in more detail later. And he's obviously started his first deportations. There have been some trouble, but that seems to have rectified itself to a certain degree. And I woke up yesterday morning to discover that Donald Trump had apparently said that Starmer is doing a very good job so far. According to whom? According to whom? Certainly not according to the people who have been in prison for social media posts. Certainly not according to the man who died as a consequence of being imprisoned because Keir Starmer is a very punishing prime minister and doesn't want dissent in any way. No shortage of useful idiots. The kid is an actor. Who are we talking about? What are we talking about? Project Stargate, anybody? Indeed, Project Stargate. And bit concerning, after we talked on Friday about Larry Ellison and his company Oracle and the problems with that and how Trump says America is going to be at the forefront for AI. Well, now it's looking increasingly that either Larry Ellison or Elon Musk will be purchasing TikTok. They're saying that TikTok can no longer belong to the Chinese, that there is a problem there with security and data and all manner of reasons that they're making up. And but yes, so it's looking increasingly like Larry Ellison and Elon Musk, or one or both, or a number of other tech billionaires who were at Trump's inauguration. They were front and center there, remember, which told us the priority he's going to be placing on the tech billionaires. AI will be our new government. Good morning, Marshka. How are you, darling? Teresa says only 15 weeks until the 100th episode of Wake Up. And Vape King says Larry Ellison is filthy rich, as is his son, both tech oligarchs. Are you going to talk about Obama and Big Mike splitting up? Says Just a Country Girl. Are they splitting up? Jennifer Aniston did that unprecedented thing of denying that she's in a relationship with Barack Obama. These generally very, very famous celebrities are told not to comment on these things. Why did she feel the need to do that? I see, got you. Do you, Swam? Never saw that one coming, I say sarcastically. So they want a monopoly and total control over social media. Yes, Kiwi, that is exactly what they want. And I'm wondering whether Trump was trolling us by talking about Keir Starmer in that way. It's difficult to know, isn't it? It's very difficult to know. And I wonder whether we've been so dazzled by some of the things that he's done in his early executive orders, like, you know, only two genders, withdrawal from WHO, withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. All that stuff is fantastic. But are we being dazzled by it to such a degree that we're ignoring the fact that all of these tech billionaires are all coming together and suddenly mRNA is back on the table again in a very frightening way? In a very, very frightening way, which unfortunately we can't discuss in any great detail because this is YouTube. And they're still stuck in the tyranny. American YouTube is now operating differently. They can talk in more detail about C19, but sadly not us. He was being sarcastic. Yes, Just a Country Girl says, great show and only 10 minutes in. Well, I like the sound of that. I like the sound of that. Trump's been saying some really disturbing things. He's floated this plan of just cleaning out Gaza and moving 1 million Palestinians to Jordan and Egypt. This is odd. Also, obviously, I think many of you are aware that Bill Gates had a long dinner, 3 hours plus, with Trump on Boxing Day. That sounds like that they are more than just kind of colleagues or people who may work together. Boxing Day, that's still Christmas, right? And Bill Gates has been talking about it during promo interviews for his new book. He said that together with Trump, they will work, I'm quoting, to fast track vaccines in the way that Trump was able to do during the COVID-19. But I had another thought. Elon Musk kicked off on Boxing Day. He was absolutely furious on X, going mad at everybody. And, about, I think what is it called? The H1 program. I'm not sure. It's where they can bring in immigrants for jobs. And it turns out that even though they've been talking about deportations and everything, Elon Musk has for a number of years been bringing in immigrants from India to stock his businesses. And people are on Twitter saying, well, this doesn't even make sense. Aren't you part of kind of MAGA? And Elon Musk kicked off. And I'm wondering now, because we know what Elon Musk is like, I'm wondering if he kicked off because he knew that Bill Gates was spending quality time with Donald Trump and he wasn't invited. They're all actors. They're playing us like a fiddle. Gates is grabbing at straws, paying them a pittance. Mel's paying them an absolute pittance, essentially slave labor. But it ties them in because when they're brought into the country, they can only work for that who they've been brought in for. And they're doing the same thing in the UK. Rachel Reeves was at WEF last week talking about a very similar thing, how they're going to be bringing in people. So don't think for 1 second that they are dealing with immigration. No, they are not. Not for a second. Gates should be arrested, not wined and dined, said Finbar. I mean, who can argue with that, Finbar? Who can argue with that? Anyway, I'll be no doubt coming back to Donald Trump and Elon Musk throughout the show, but I want to welcome in our first guest. Let me bring him in now. Here he is, Professor Richard Enos. How are you, Richard?
I'm fine. I'm hoping I can keep up with you.
What do you mean by that?
A very lively show. Really enjoying it.
Thank you so much. Well, I appreciate that. I'm sure that your contribution will be absolutely worthy. I've met you several times now, Richard, because obviously I've been honoured to be a guest at Common Knowledge in Edinburgh, of which you're part of. But before we get to that, tell us, why did you get involved with Common Knowledge?
Actually, I was one of the founders of Common Knowledge. I've been pushing back against regulations for COVID since they were introduced in March 2020. At that time, I wrote to the Scottish government and told them that they were doing the wrong thing. I only got a reply 3 months later saying, stay at home and save the NHS. I've been involved in protests, spoken at rallies, done yellow boards, and eventually we decided it was necessary to have a forum where we could talk openly with everybody about all the issues that we were concerned about. And that's why we formed Common Knowledge. It was in 2020. Oh, that's a long time ago. 2022.
Feels like forever now, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's been ages ago. Yeah.
And you've had some brilliant guests, myself included.
Yeah, you included. Yeah, so our guests, and we've invited you up twice.
Yes, you have. Thank you.
So impressed the first time around.
Thank you very much. Well, I very much appreciate it. And obviously, you're going to be having your own COVID inquiry, which we're going to get to in a second. But I want people to understand a little of what you bring to the table. Tell us a little bit about your research areas, Richard.
My research areas? Well, I used to be, I was a professor of evolutionary biology at Edinburgh University. And I worked on plants mainly, and the evolution of plants, and also diseases in plants. And I worked on trees, the evolution of trees, and I've been lately concerned about introduced diseases that have been brought into Britain that have infected our trees. One of them being ash dieback, which is currently killing a lot of our trees. And I've been I'm from an environmental point of view. I'm interested in ecology, but doing it the right way and not doing it the wrong way. And what really annoys me is the way in which ecology itself has been subverted. And a lot of the things that we're told about ecology are complete nonsense. Climate crisis, for instance, and many other aspects of ecology. So I'm really keen on getting out what's the real truth about all of these things.
I love that. And I can see why you were involved in the formation of Common Knowledge. Absolutely. Because there's a necessity for it. We have such a sort of, absence of real, true quality information. And I think that's really what you're aiming for. At the Scottish People's COVID Inquiry, it's going to be Saturday, 22nd of February, 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Venue still to be confirmed, I understand. And that's usually...
We do have a venue now, yeah.
Where's your venue?
Our venue is Lauriston Hall in Edinburgh.
Is that central Edinburgh?
That's near central. It's pretty central, yeah.
Brilliant. Tell us about it, right? I'm just looking at some of your speakers, brilliant speakers. Dr. Claire Craig, I've talked to Claire a number of times. Professor Diane Rasmussen, I've talked to Diane. She even introduced me at the Christmas Common Knowledge. Yourself, of course, Dr. Liz Evans, a number of other people. Talk to us about the Scottish People's COVID-19 Inquiry, Richard.
Well, people may not be aware that there are two COVID inquiries taking place at the moment. One of them is the UK inquiry. The other one is the Scottish COVID inquiry. And the aim, it's costing a lot of money, over £26 million spent so far in Scotland. And we've had hardly any media coverage of this at all. But what's come out of it has been lots and lots of testimonies from normal people about their experiences. And they're particularly concerned with health and social care. So we've heard really graphic descriptions of the terrible things that people endured, especially during the first few months of the lockdowns. And I've read through all the testimonies. I mean, I was in tears reading some of the things that people went through. And it's all there, but it's not been publicized. And we want to raise awareness of all of this. And we want to think about, well, what can we do about this? What are the questions that need to be asked? Who needs to be asked those questions? And put the pressure on to get some accountability for what happened at that time, which was really dreadful.
Absolutely dreadful, and much worse, well, not much worse, but equally as poor, is that both of those inquiries you refer to have not a hope in hell of establishing the truth, because they start off from terms of reference that are not designed to establish the truth. And my position on inquiries like this is it's about solidifying the narrative as opposed to revealing what really took place, which is why I really welcome what you're doing, Richard. It's so vital. What are your feelings in terms of what I've just said, that it's about solidifying the narrative?
I totally agree with you, because this evidence is being taken, but it's not being put in context at all. So if you want to know about why people had these terrible experiences, they would say it's because it's the pandemic. Oh, it's because it's some deadly virus. No questioning of those assumptions at the very beginning. What you need to do is to go right back to the beginning and say, okay, in 2020, was there a deadly disease? Oh, well, actually, no, because even though COVID-19 had been formally described as a high consequence disease, that actually had been removed by the time that these restrictions were put in. Yeah, so go back to there. Then look at the public health measures. They went against all known public health measures that have been accepted before. And we have an expert who is a public health person who'll tell you that one of the things that you do if there is a public health emergency is that you don't frighten the public. You reassure them. And the whole aspect of what the media were trying to do was to whip up fear, and they're very, very, very successful about that. That's exactly the opposite of what you should do. So all of these guidelines were breached, and then we look at the specific things that people did. They had do not resuscitate orders placed on blanket placement on care homes. All the people in there, no consultation whatsoever on those people. And things like if you had a do not resuscitate order placed on you, that effectively meant that you would not receive any treatment in hospital. People were refusing to take people with the DNR orders into hospital for regular treatment. And then people who were in care homes, they were effectively isolated, and in many cases they were in solitary confinement, basically, which is one of the most extreme forms of punishment. And those are all measures imposed by the Scottish government.
And the British government, and it's absolutely shocking. You're absolutely right. They terrorised us, didn't they? And they didn't just terrorise us, they used taxpayer money in order to do that. At the last count, we knew of at least £120 million had been used by Boris Johnson's government to put out propaganda that was designed to terrify us. None of this will be tackled in the official inquiries, which is why what you're doing is so absolutely vital. What do you hope to gain from this, though, Richard? Because obviously, oftentimes what happens is there's people like us, we know the truth, we know there's a problem here, but what are you hoping in terms of the wider world that you will get from your inquiry?
Well, first of all, it's raising awareness. So we're not putting ourselves up as conspiracy theorists. We're just reasonable people and we want to show that this is what happened. Many people's experiences of lockdown might have been, and I've heard it said to me, oh, I had quite a good lockdown, you know. Well, think a bit more widely. Think about all those in Scotland, 40,000 people in care homes. What happened to them? Think about their experiences. Think more widely than, you know, just yourself. So raising awareness like that. Also, one of the things that we lack is coordinated efforts about holding people to account. So bringing together as many people as possible with the same aims of really investigating properly what happened, and getting together in a group. What we've lacked and what we continue to lack is people getting together and talking with one another face to face. That's what we really need, not just over social media, but face to face and in big groups, and developing power in that way. And we can then have coordinated actions. And the other thing that we lack is we just don't have any money. And if we pool our resources, then it may be that we're able to go and take some sort of legal actions, though that might not work, but at least it's another way of raising awareness and pursuing the people who should be accountable for what happened.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I do appreciate it. Just before you leave us, what would you like people to know about this event?
Well, we're going to be showing some of the testimonies from this inquiry. You're going to have people there who've actually suffered. We'd love people to come along and tell us about their experiences, and that would really contribute enormously to the conference. So if you can make it, please do. It's a whole day event, but you won't be entertained, but you will be
informed
over the whole that day.
Absolutely. Everybody, this is Professor Richard Ennos, brilliant guest, and he is talking about the Scottish People's COVID-19 inquiry on the 22nd of February in Edinburgh. I believe there is already a link in the description down below, and if not, I will ensure there is one at the end of the stream. Thank you, Richard. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you very much indeed.
Take good care of yourself. Thank you. Wonderful to have him with us. Absolutely wonderful to have him with us. Such a knowledgeable man. And you're absolutely right. There's a comment there which compares humans and trees. You're absolutely right. What was that comment? Let me find it. Mark, wearing masks outdoors. I mean, masks. Oh, depopulation agenda, says sail away. Somebody, there was a brilliant comment, and I meant to, but it was so long I didn't want to put it on screen in case I threw him. But it was about the comparison between trees and humans. Sorry, I missed that. Note, John says, note, they changed the meaning of the terms vaccine pandemic and herd immunity over the last 10 years or so to the run-up of COVID. They certainly did. Well said, Richard. And then give them my dazzlem. Yes, Marcuson. And then give them my dazzlem. I mean, it just beggars belief, doesn't it, what they've been allowed to get away with. And the problem is they're going to continue getting away with it unless we do something about it. And the danger is we're not going to do anything about it. That is a danger, a massive danger. Right. I'm reluctant to pick up another story just because in case my next guest arrives. But let's see what I could cover in a brief period of time. The Climate and Nature Bill. We were joined on Friday by Earl and Martin from the Freedom Alliance to raise awareness to the awful Climate and Nature Bill, which was due a second hearing in Parliament on Friday. Well, it was defeated. Not a complete defeat. They will be back in July for another go, but the people involved think that this is it. And the government won a motion by 120 votes to 7 to end debate of the bill, meaning it will not return to the House of Commons until July. It's unlikely to become law. It just simply doesn't have enough time now to progress through the individual stages. The Climate and Nature Bill had been proposed by Lib Dem MP Ros Savage. However, she said she would not push for a vote on the bill itself, having agreed to work with ministers to find a way forward. What else was said about it? A Downing Street spokesperson said the UK already has a well-developed legislative framework with legally binding targets, including the Climate Change Act 2008 and the carbon budgets. Savage acknowledged that the UK had already signed up to various international commitments, but said her bill aimed to close the ambition gap between what is needed and what is promised, and the delivery gap between what is promised and what is actually happening. I see. So, yes, it will be back in the House in July, but that's it. It looks like it's over and done with. Some people were very angry that none of the Reform UK MPs appeared to show up to vote to adjourn this terrible bill. And also Caroline Lucas, long of the Green Party, she was very upset about it. I want to show you a video later when I doorstepped Caroline Lucas about chemtrails. She's odious. She's just part of the British establishment. She really is. And actually, David Icke was one of the very first people to expose the Green Party. And that's because he'd been a member of the Green Party. And there's nothing like being a member of something to know how it works and then to be able to expose them. Simple stuff. So really good. That is good news, at least. Stopped it in its tracks. I consider it very similar to what's happened with the Trump presidency so far. And that is, I don't necessarily agree with everything that's taken place, but I'm absolutely delighted when ridiculous potential laws like this get stopped. And same way with in Trump's presidency, the whole thing to do with obviously climate and gender, all that stuff, I completely support. I completely support. Councils don't work for their constituents. That's plain to see, says George. Absolutely. Let me catch up with your comments, people. Thank you, Richard. You are brilliant, says Jan. Saw a young girl alone and driving her car the other day wearing a mask. Patty, these people just look insane, don't they? They look completely disturbed and unwell, like something is seriously wrong. I wonder where my guest is. Let me just, hello. Are you there? Because we may have a time differential here going on. Well, we do have a time difference. My next guest is in America, and sometimes we get confusions with time, don't we? Sometimes we get confusions with time. Magnesium is amazing. It keeps my nighttime cramps away, says Teresa. I see. Who's insane? Who's insane? Who are we talking about now? Oh, yeah, all the people vouching for this. Actually, do you know what? While I've got time, I might as well do this Caroline Lucas video. I think you're going to enjoy this. So look, I'm going to set the scene. This was 2014, outside the Houses of Parliament. Caroline Lucas, who was then still leading the Green Party, if I remember correctly. I think she might have been co-chairing it. And obviously, if any party is going to know, you'd think, right, about geoengineering, it should be the Green Party, right? So anyway, have a listen, see what you think.
Caroline, just a quick question, please. I saw a video on YouTube in which somebody was asking you about geoengineering and you didn't want to talk about it. Is there any particular reason why you don't?
I'm really not going to be just doorstep like that.
Ooh, no, that's really interesting, isn't it? A member of the Green Party doesn't actually want to talk about geoengineering. I find that quite phenomenal. Chemtrails exist, Caroline! Look at that.
Look, she points up.
Fascinating. Did you see how that threw her? She didn't actually know how to respond to that. People, wake up. You know, you're going on about this being a real alternative to a political party. The woman couldn't even answer one simple question. Ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. And the thing is, I don't know if you see this point where her assistants ask her what I'm talking about. And look, she points up. I think you can see, look, you can see her pointing up into the sky. She knows what I'm talking about. She knew what I was talking about then. But how remiss of her. To me, Caroline Lucas is absolutely typical of these politicians who just sit in Parliament. They do very little. Thank you, Mr. Mack. I appreciate that. And they do very little other than, you know, draw their salary and kind of show up and do very basic stuff. But they're not making the real changes. And she didn't make the real change. And I've never liked her ever since. Green Party is a waste of space. Indeed, it is. Indeed, it is a waste of space. You're ruining my lucrative MSM contract for talking rubbish. Yeah. Milford is not impressed with Caroline Lucas. Who is? What does Greta T think about geoengineering? Finbar, has anybody ever asked Greta? Anybody ever asked Greta? And I hear from my sources in Parliament that there are issues already with Ed Miliband and his absolutely insane net zero targets. There are problems. And I am hearing that Keir Starmer may well be considering removing him. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing. Yes. Yes, going green seems like nothing but vomit comes out. Indeed, indeed, indeed. I got a funny feeling that my guest may well have gotten the times confused, because that happens sometimes, right? That happens sometimes. Well, seeing as that's the case, I'm going to have to keep moving on. And if I get into the middle of a story, then I will come back to my guest. My guest is coming on to talk about Operation Gladio, and I really want to talk about that. I really do. I see that, Elon Musk. Elon Musk appeared. Let's see if I've got an image of this. Here he is. He appeared at the AFD rally in Germany on Saturday. This was fairly amusing. And so he obviously appeared by link. And AFD is what's commonly described as a far-right party in Germany. It's very much about Germany for the German people. And Elon Musk showed up to say, and actually some of the stuff I do agree with him on this. I have to say I don't agree. You know, sometimes there are some people that you disagree with fervently, but every now and again they said something, you agree with them. And one of the things he said was, you know, it is actually really important that people maintain their own culture. And I do agree with that. I don't think we should become one kind of, amorphous whole in this world. I do believe that people should have their own kind of, their own culture, their own language, and we should respect that. And that was one of the things that he was saying about Germany. But where he upset people, he didn't upset me, but where he upset people was he said basically that Germany have to get over their guilt towards what happened during the wartime, towards Jews, etc. He didn't actually say towards Jews, but that's what he was talking about. That's what he was talking about. And what you have are these very high profile Jews absolutely kicking off, saying, see, we knew he was a Nazi. And there are people literally on X saying, no, Germans need to be upset about this for 1,000 years. And they're serious. They are serious. And my daughter and I went to Berlin recently, and you only have to go to like the Jewish memorial and realize how kind of steeped and how heavy Berlin still is. And there is absolutely a guilt. There is no doubt about it. Randy said, Elon is a very dangerous man. Yes, but do you know what? Every now and again, even dangerous men get it right. Even dangerous men get it right. Let me see if my guest is here. She is. I'm so thrilled. I want to talk to her very, very much. Right. Let me remove Elon from the stage. I might come back to that. But this is far more interesting. It's a colonel on the line. It is a colonel. How are you this morning? I didn't know whether we'd gotten ourselves all confused, but I'm so delighted to have you with us. You are a retired US Air Force Colonel Towner-Watkins. Is it Roxanne?
Yes, Roxanne. Thank you.
Lovely to have you with us, Roxanne. Thank you for joining us. I'm so grateful. Operation Gladio, which is why you've joined us today. I must admit, I didn't know a great deal about it. It'd been brought to my attention about a year ago. And I looked at it and I was like, that's insane. These people, they were planning all of this. But you're going to do a proper deep dive for us, because I think it's the type of thing that our viewers will love to know more about. So a bit of background, first of all. Anyone out there familiar with Operation Gladio? We'll get ready for an education. This one involves the CIA, the Vatican, false flag operations, deep criminality. This is the psyop operation to end all psyop operations in many regards. And as I say, let me welcome in lovely Roxanne, who is here with us today. Some people will struggle to believe what we're about to talk about, but I can assure you this is 100% real, shockingly so. Yes, Roxanne?
Yes. Thank you for having me. Even if people like yourself, and I spent 30 years in the United States Air Force, and I have 6 different degrees. I'm an avid reader. I went to I have 2 master's degrees, one of which is in business and another one in strategic studies from the Air War College, which is a year-long in residence. You go to Montgomery, Alabama, and you learn all about world history as it relates to military, economic, and political unrest all over the world. And so you think, after all of this education, that you're fairly up to date on most major military involvement in different operations around the world. And so about 2 years ago, I was reading a book called The Third Way. And they talked about stay behind units. And I'm like, stay behind units, what is that? I've never heard of it. And it was talking about World War II. And again, I've spent a lot of time reading about World War II.
Wow, this is how deeply covered it is then, that even somebody with your background and experience
Never
wow
heard about it. So another very ironic point in all of this. I did a search on stay behind units, and I came up with this guy's book right here, Paul Williams' book. It's free on archive.org. Anybody can read it. This man was deep. He spent the most of his life teaching in the Catholic Church. He was a well-written reporter. He reported wrote articles in places like the Washington Post, and he appeared on Fox News, and very, very well-known guy. And he stumbled across Operation Gladio too. And so he started doing all of this research, wrote this book. And so when I looked up stay behind units, Operation Gladio came up. And so I'm reading his book, and what pulled me into this rabbit hole is that, I don't know, most of the way through the book, he talks about how on the 2nd of August, 1990, President of Italy, Andreotti, goes on national television. And that's the day I flew into the Rome airport to live in Italy for 3 years. I was going to be stationed there at San Vito Air Base.
that sounds like synergy.
Yeah. Okay. So I know this date, like, you know, it's like seared into my brain, because having been in the Air Force and traveled quite extensively, I had never been in an airport where when I got off the airplane, at about a 5-to-1 ratio, there were carabinieri everywhere with machine guns. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? And that's the same day that Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, which is why they were on high alert.
Wow.
So that day in my brain is like seared in my brain. And I'm like, wait a minute. I was there in Italy the day he talked about, and for the first time in Europe, was revealed. And people have the misunderstanding that Operation Gladio was only a European thing.
Yes, they do.
So so it was a requirement. Danielle Ganser wrote a book called NATO's Secret Armies. And just to go back in time, back to World War II, to give you a 5-minute overview of what it is. Hitler, chief of intelligence for the Eastern Front, was Reinhard Gehlen, General Reinhard Gehlen. His assistant was Otto Skorzeny. Now, those three people are pivotal in the creation of stay-behinds, because the stay-behind units were developed and implemented throughout all of the Eastern Front. As Hitler moved towards the Soviet Union, he set up these stay-behind units, with Otto Skorzeny being the trainer and Reinhard Gehlen being the intelligence coordinator, right? Now, what's really important about this, and I'm going to bring in the English history here, the first known use in history of stay-behind units was in the Boer War in Southern Africa. So the British goes down there to, back in the Cecil Rhodes time frame, they go down there to basically steal the gold and the treasure in the Boer area in Southern Africa. And they get defeated by the Boers, who were just like, almost Stone Age farmers. They didn't have modern weapons or anything. But what they did have was a tactic called a stay behind unit. So they actually buried weapons. They heard through the grapevine that the British had landed, and so they were preparing a defense, because they had already found gold over in the like Rhodesia area. So they knew what was going to happen. They do their burying of their weapons and everything. And so as the British came into their area, their soldiers came in, took up their weapons, and attacked them from the rear. And they were able to defeat the British. Well, there was a reporter with the British, and his name was Winston Churchill. And Winston Churchill saw this tactic and knew that was some, and he goes on to be in the War Department and Britain, and so there's a story of the 5 sisters, the Mitford sisters. Have you heard about them?
Well, I have. My fear is that we might not have time to cover everything. So I want to make sure that our viewers are completely au fait with what Operation Gladio is. Right.
So,
we'll come back to the Mitford sisters, can we? Or
yes.
Is it so integral?
No. Well, no, because that's how it is surmised that how, because they were so close to the Churchill family, and they were also one of them dated or was a girlfriend, if you will, of Hitler. There is pictures of her. So they believe that the tactic and the communication was there, and that's how that information was passed on to the Germans, and how they even knew.
Oh, I got you. I've got you.
Yeah. So there's like a continuity there.
Right. Right.
So anyway, now we've got the tactic, we've employed it. And as the Russians did start coming back and pushing the Germans back into Germany, there were cells on the stay behind unit concept that was activated. Well, do you know where one of the biggest concentrations was? In Ukraine. And do you know who ran them? Stetsko and Bandera, who are the like the granddaddies of the modern Azov and right sector Nazis that have been involved in the current Ukrainian.
Interesting, because it seems like the same playbook over and over again.
Yes.
Right? The objective was to, at the time we were told, that we were told now, was to counter an invasion of Europe by the Warsaw Pact, right? That was the aim of it, and obviously involved NATO, United States, CIA. But I think the involvement of the Vatican in itself, very, very involved, right? Financially. So there was a lot of money to be made from this. And the other thing that I want to make sure that we absolutely cover is the false flags, right? And the amount of deaths that they were prepared to use as collateral damage to conduct this. So that was the original idea. It was to counter an invasion, right? Tell us about the Vatican involvement.
So I'm not even, I will go with the official story that was what they told us, but I am not convinced that was ever actually the real. I believe that was sold to the governments as what they were supposed to do, because here's the other piece of this that always gets left out. Paul Helliwell, who was at the OSS, precursor to the CIA, he is over in China with Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang Kai-shek is known and famous for being the general, the warlord general, Chinese general, that when the British, who always seems to focus around this, was taking Indian opium and selling it into China, which you had the Boxer Wars, Boxer Rebellion, Chiang Kai-shek paid for his army by selling opium. So Paul Helliwell is over there, an American colonel, and he's in the OSS, which is the precursor to the CIA. And he calls up Alan Dulles, who is in Switzerland for the OSS and soon to be the CIA director. And he says, "Hey, Alan, you know what's going on over here? They've got all this opium over here, and Chiang Kai-shek is selling it to the Chinese to make money. And he's using that money to buy weapons." And Alan Dulles goes, "Oh, heck, that's a great idea." So after World War II is drawing down, Alan Dulles, who is who knows Reinhard Gehlen, gets in touch with Reinhard Gehlen and Otto Skorzeny, and he tells them that he has the idea of creating this stay behind concept all over the world, not just in Europe.
It's all
And they're
over the
going to
world.
pay for it by selling opium. Because
Right.
how else are you going to get
Right.
the guns?
Right.
Well, if you're going to sell illegal drugs to people all over the world, and you're going to use a Chinese warlord to do it, you have to have a navy, and you have to have weapons, and you have to have airplanes. And none of it can be on the books because it's all secret. That's where the Vatican came in. The Vatican is going to
Wow.
money launder all of that money from selling opium all over the world in order to fund the stay behind units, the training for them, and the equipment that is going to go. So Italy alone had over 400 weapon cache stashes all over their country that eventually was discovered and admitted by Andreotti on August 2nd, 1990. Germany had it. Agenter Press is what it was called in Portugal. Belgium had it. And Turkey has it. Turkey still has them. They're called gray wolves. They are known somewhat differently by different names in every country over there, but every single country there, Daniel Ganser said that there was a secret agreement by every country that entered NATO that you had to have stay behind units. It's kind of like your
Wow.
yeah.
Thing is, people listening to this may think, oh, well, okay, you know, it was something that had to be done in order to protect us, blah, 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 blah. They used deep criminality, assassination, murder in order to achieve their objectives, didn't they?
So the Bologna train station bombing in Italy, and what they did was, to me, this is the worst part of it.
I agree.
They made up communist organizations. The Red Brigade, people still believe today, was really associated with the Soviet Union communist movement. It was not. It was from the very beginning a group of intelligence agents that called themselves the Red Brigade. They got workers. They just came out of Mussolini's fascism and the exploitation of workers. They got workers to believe that they were creating a workers' movement. They called it the Red Brigade. Then they basically advertised it as being communistic in nature, and then used the Red Brigade, their armbands. Instead of them actually being this group of Red Brigades, it was actually the Gladio cells that were activated. They put on the Red Brigade armbands. They blew up train stations. They blew up banks. They mass murdered people in terrorist activity. Now, if you fast forward after the fall of the Soviet Union to 1991, well, if you are absent a boogeyman because the Soviet Union all of a sudden doesn't exist anymore, do you know what they did then? They pivot to radical Islamic terror. And that's the whole reason that the Kuwaiti invasion happened. That was pre-coordinated with the US ambassador in Iraq to tell Saddam Hussein that he was able to attack Kuwait and no one was going to do anything about it. Because as soon as he attacked Kuwait, all we ever heard, both in Europe and the United States, is that they hate us because of our freedom. Well, anybody that lives in our countries knows we don't have freedom. We pay taxes on everything and everything. Those people didn't hate us because of our freedom.
You're blowing my mind this morning. And the reason why is because what you're depicting is basically very little has actually changed. Even though we were told Operation Gladio ended 1990. That's what we were told, 1952 to 1990. But very little has changed. And one of the things I think people will struggle to understand or believe, Roxanne, because we even have that now, is people struggle to believe that a state would turn on its people, would be prepared to kill its people to further its political means. 80 plus people were killed in the Bologna train attack,
so
right?
Your two bombings, here they are indicative of exactly how they do it. So the day those bombings happened in England, there was a training exercise going on.
You're talking 7/7 now, aren't you? Yes, there was a training exercise going on, and that's
that
common,
was an
isn't
Operation Gladio.
That was, did you say?
Yes, it was.
7/7 was part of Operation Gladio.
Yes.
Wow.
Every bit of it was pre-planned, and it was done in order to manipulate the country. They did it in Spain with the train bombings. It has happened all around Europe. In the disco bombing in Germany, every single one of them was Operation Gladio. And it was done to create the narrative of radical Islamic terrorism so they could manipulate us. 9/11 was one. The Boston bombing in the United States was one. This is a premeditated controlling mechanism in order to get populations to do what they want and to psychologically traumatize us.
I mean, the thing is I know what you're saying is right, but it's very hard for people to understand because, for the most part, I believe people are good. They can't understand the machinations of these wicked people who want us to turn on each other. I mean, but ultimately, what is the end goal of this, Roxanne?
Okay. So what I didn't cover, and we could come back and cover it later, is a long time ago at the end of the 1800s, you had the British Round Table. You had Cecil Rhodes, Balfour, Oswald Mosley, that whole group. They were made up of eugenicists and very evil people without souls. And they decided back in the late 1800s that they were going to create two mechanisms. And for us, for simple conversation, it was going to be a left and a right. And they were going to create Bolshevikism. And if you go back and watch the fund and follow the money, you can find out that London and New York City funded Lenin and Trotsky to go into Russia and destroy the Tsar. We also funded Hitler together, and we also created FDR, right? So now we have the left and the right. That was their creation. Because people know, if you actually look into fascism, there's nothing on the right about it. It's actually a far left dictatorship type operation. So, but they convinced us that there is a left and a right, and that was to corral us or push us towards what Joseph Farrell calls in the book, The Third Way, a third way to be able to manipulate us. And when you go back and you look at who made those decisions, you have people that are like veterinarians, which are all about interbreeding. You have species, creating different species. You have and experimenting on people. You have Bernays, you have all of the psychological operations.
Right.
And so,
Mr. Advertising. Absolutely.
Yeah. All of those people got together, and they were very evil people. There is a certain amount of Satanism and control in every one of their backgrounds, but it's so much bigger. All of the nonprofits, you're probably very familiar with the World Wildlife Fund. It was created by the prince in the Netherlands and Charles when he was a prince. That organization is a large, their Club 1001 was a large entity in manipulating post-imperialist Africa. Their idea was to create controlling mechanisms in Pan-America, Pan-Europe, Pan-British Empire, Pan-Asia. And they're going to have a literal round table of men sitting, deciding what all goes on in the world. And they were going to use Africa as a slave colony to feed all of this. So when all of the people pulled out of Africa in the quote unquote colonial sense, all they did was send NGOs in there. They sent NGOs
That's
like
right.
the World Wildlife Fund.
Yes.
And they used that to manipulate those people, and they designated all of their resource-rich areas as national parks and stuff like that. And it was just the World Wildlife Fund and the IMF and the World Bank taking control over those countries where before there was visible colonialism. Now there's still colonialism. It's just cloaked as for the good of the country under these NGOs and World Bank apparatuses.
What you're saying is absolutely mind-blowing. I'm going to have to bring you back for a longer period and do it, because it's evident that what you're reflecting on is still happening to us.
Every overthrow of a government, every coup that is, the coups that are going on in Africa, So a cousin of Operation Gladio is called Operation Condor for your audience if they want to do the research. Operation Condor was the exact same thing that was happening in the rest of the world, but it was happening in Latin America. We overthrew every single government in Latin America except for two, British Guyana and Belize, and both of those were British colonies.
Mel says, great to have Roxanne on explaining so many tips of the iceberg for us to go away and research ourselves. You see, the thing is that many people have no idea that there is this alternate universe that is actually operating, and we're not part of the club. That's why we need people like you, Roxanne.
We
need people like
not part of it.
We're definitely not part of the club, but we need people like you who have an understanding about how this works, because some of the stuff you said today, I've seen some of the comments, people are like, well, that makes sense. And that's the thing about truth, isn't it? Is that when somebody says it, you know, it hits you, doesn't it?
So my thing in doing, I've read, by the way, I think I'm up to 87 books just about this topic. There's and I am going to produce the list of the books because there's so many of them. Here's another organization. This organization right here is called the World Anti-Communist League. This book's called Inside the League. This book takes you and explains to you an apparatus called the World Anti-Communist League, which, of course, who wouldn't be in favor of the World Anti-Communist League, right? This organization was created by the Eastern European war criminals during World War II that skinned babies alive. It was created by the Japanese war criminals like what's his name? I'm going to forget his name in a minute. But two of the worst, Tsukumo, anyway, they're Japanese names. Two of the worst war criminals in Japan that was killing our soldiers in the Bataan Death March. And they collected all of these. Chiang Kai-shek was intimately involved in this. Reverend Moon out of South Korea, who, by the way, was in a prison for sexual pedophilia in the northern sector of
Roxanne
Korea.
Doesn't mess around. Right?
Yeah.
She doesn't mess around. The amount of requests in our chat for you to come back, she hasn't even left the stage yet, people. Roxanne, you and I are going to have to do a proper deep dive, like a proper hour-long conversation, because it's evident that you have so much to bring to the table right now. And it's unfortunate that I have to let you go, but that's the way it goes. Anything you want to leave us with, just to leave people pondering?
I would ask everybody to read Operation Gladio, get familiar with the terms and what the concept is, and it will be a lot better. I have two terms. Well, I have one that you have to understand. Follow me on X. I have a link, a Swedish follower of mine takes all of my 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I do a class for an hour every day on X in Spaces. And there's a hyperlink on my pinned profile. Go to that. And I did a round the world Operation Gladio tour of what it looked like in all of the countries, not all of them that it's been in, just a sampling of it. So go there and then understand this one term, international syndicate. Everybody gets hung up on who's behind all of this today. So instead of saying it's all of the Jesuits or it's all of the whatever, all of the Jewish people or all of the bankers, it is an elite group, and you have to get away from people trying to put words in your mouth. You just call it the international syndicate, and then we can put that here. And we can talk about the actual operation. We can go back and look at who's in the syndicate after you understand what the operation is.
Magnificent stuff. Linda, I can assure you, Linda says, I love your shows. Would it be possible to make this segment into a short video? There's so much credible info. It would be a great short video to share. Absolutely, Linda, that will be done. Roxanne is an absolute star. We love her, and we will absolutely be bringing her back. Thank you, Colonel, says everybody. Yes, this lady is indeed awesome, Sean. Indeed, she is. Everybody, this is the absolutely tremendous. She's a former colonel, but she is a truth seeker, an absolute truth seeker. Thank you for joining us this morning, Colonel. Wonderful to have you with us. Take good care of yourself. How
Thank you.
magnificent is she, people? She's absolutely wonderful. She's joined dots. Oh, yeah, she's brilliant at joining dots, isn't she? And I was recommended to talk with her. And actually, when I started, first of all, to look into what she'd covered, I was like, I'm not sure. And the more I started to drill down on it, I was like, okay, this is a dot joiner, rather. And we like those around here. And I don't want to waste a second, because it's one of those days where we just have one brilliant guest after another. And here's one. Here she is. Magnificent Jane Gunn. How are you, Jane?
Morning, Sonia. Yes, fine, thank you. Stormy, isn't it?
I was just talking earlier. I'd gone out into the garden with the dog, as you do before the show, and a tree branch must be 20 foot plus has snapped in the middle of the garden. I was like, I wasn't aware it was that stormy, actually.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware it was that stormy. I'm delighted to have Jane with us. I was given this as a present recently. I absolutely adore it. And thank you, lovely Linda, for recommending Jane. And right, Jane, let's tell people about you and how wonderful you also are, because we have a series of wonderful people on today. Jane Gunn is the barefoot mediator. You're a mediator. You're a speaker. You're an author. You're a former corporate lawyer.
Yes.
You are an expert in conflict resolution, and obviously you operate under the name the Barefoot Mediator. And it says that you specialize in transforming business relationships, but you really specialize in sort of dealing with things head on and showing people how to negotiate, how to mediate their way through life. Pick up wherever you want to, really. I mean, I think that we're living through incredibly turbulent times, but perhaps life has always been turbulent. Perhaps this is just the turbulence that we're living through now. What is it that you're kind of greeted with on a constant basis when you're talking with people? What is at the forefront of people's minds?
Well, I think what is going on is storms, and
Storms.
in the book is about storm, and it's amazing that it should be such a stormy day today. It's really the challenge of course, we all, we're all going to meet storms, whether they're real storms or storms in our lives or storms in our business. The challenge is, how do we deal with them? And more than that, how do we anticipate them and how are we prepared for them? So I replied to someone today who said, what do I do about this? And the thing is, if when the storm hits, your roof's leaking or your fence blows down, you know that you weren't prepared. And if you don't then deal with that, then it's going to be worse next time, or your fence is going to blow away, which mine does sometimes, into your neighbour's garden. So, a storm is a warning that something isn't right. And also we get warning signs that a storm is coming. Now, what I see in many relationships and organizations is that people ignore those signs. Right. So we like to deny danger. We have disbelief. Disbelief prevails over reality, and we don't have plans for dealing with storms. That's kind of the ground that I deal with most times, and particularly in organizations and with boards that I work with.
One of the things that you say, and I have to agree with you, is that no one's coming to save you. And you don't mean that in any harsh way, that we're all left on our own. But what you're saying is that we have to take our kind of responsibility, right? We have to take our own responsibility. Not everybody is able to do that, Jane. How do we help people in this world with those who are able to take responsibility and those who aren't? Do you ever encounter people who you just think, I'm not sure how this person is going to help themselves?
Well, I think we all need a group around us. We need to know who our trusted friends and advisors are. Right. And that's really important from childhood on, that we understand who our trusted people are and who we can go to for advice and help. Of course, none of us, or hopefully none of us, is entirely on our own. But what I mean is, there's no politician, there's no pop star, nobody is coming with a message that's going to save us. If we sit on our own and do nothing, we have to stand up, we have to speak up, we have to go out there and find our own tribe and our own group of supporters. And that's what gets us through these times, really, knowing who we can trust.
Have you always been like this? Because you sound very solid, very stable. Right. But some people have to go through incredibly rocky waters in order to be able to reach that. I had quite a disturbed childhood and all of those things. I had something of a breakdown at the age of 30, but that enabled me to rebuild on actually much more solid ground. What about you?
Yes, I mean the same. People think 'cause I'm a corporate lawyer, I had an easy time. No,
Right.
I left school with hardly any exams. I had to fight my way into law school, even persuade them that I was entitled to go and study law. So yeah, I often look as though I've got the suit and the pearls on, but that's not quite the case. And I think I've always been a rebel at heart. In other words, wanting to sort of challenge the system, challenge the situation, and just say, no, is this right? Or I am entitled to do something that others are saying you can't do. So yes, I think from an early stage, I need to stand up for myself and make my own way. And, as you say, the book is about finding your own path, traveling your own path, not hiding away from reality or thinking that you can't do something that you want to do.
I want to talk about Morris the Mole because
I brought him to show you, actually.
Oh, please. Oh, it's a real thing.
It's a real thing.
And you were actually told by a client, right, that your work was helping them to learn how to make molehills out of mountains, which is lovely. Obviously, it's a complete reversal of the actual expression. And what it originally means is people make huge things out of nothing, right? But what this is saying is that you take huge things and you reduce them to nothing, or at least to manageable chunks. And this is a journey. I absolutely love the journey of Morris, because initially when you look at it, you're like, oh, is this for children? Then you start reading. And the thing is, what I love about it, it's so accessible, and we need that. It's one of those ones that you can leave on a coffee table and people can just thumb through it and go, and it gives you a literal breakdown. Talk to us about the murky swamp.
Oh, the murky swamp of reality. Well, that's the place. What I've done in the book is track the journey that my clients go on when I'm working. It can be our journey through life, but it's also the journey my clients go on when I'm trying to help them resolve a conflict or a challenge. And the bit they want to skip over, and the place where they're stuck, is what I call the murky swamp of reality. They would rather go directly from problem to solution, which is what we see happening in the world and in politics and everything. Here's the problem. Here's the solution. Don't worry about the murky swamp. The murky swamp is the place where we have to dig deeper. We have to go into the darkness, into the depths of the murky swamp. And it's the place where we think, I can't see. Everything's dark and murky. I don't quite understand where we're going. And then somebody dangles a solution and says, no, this is the way. But no, you have to go into the deep, dark swamp and find out what the reality is. What's the reality of the situation? What are the experts saying? What does your experience tell you? What else is there to discover? What further evidence is there? So I've got two principles really that impact my work. One is this idea of self-determination. You decide. But the second is, rather like in medicine, fully informed consent. You do your own digging, deep digging, which could be understanding yourself, but understanding the situation you're in, not relying on someone else to tell you what it is, and not relying on someone else to tell you what the solution is or should be.
It's very interesting you say that, of course, because in the last week, a new president is in the United States, Donald Trump. And for many people, it's very cult-like, obviously. For many people, he is absolutely a savior. He's come to save us. And while I don't necessarily associate your work with being political, it can't help but touch on politics and what is going on around the world. And as you say, and I think this is absolutely brilliant, there is no global politician, religious leader, pop or film star, media influencer, or anyone else who's going to rescue you from the various crises and conflicts that threaten to engulf humanity. And I think you always come back to humanity. And obviously that's that point about how we have to save ourselves. But I wonder, how much is fear an obstacle to us saving ourselves?
I think fear is the greatest virus, is the virus of fear. I said that right at the very beginning in 2020. I gave a speech early in 2020, and I said the greatest virus is the virus of fear. When we are fearful, when our fears are played upon, we can't think clearly. We can't see the bigger picture. We become vulnerable. Certainly if we've had vulnerable upbringings or childhoods, we are even more vulnerable to that fear. And so being able to understand fear and overcome it is a huge part of my work and of understanding how we operate in the world today.
And one of the things that you say is that we have to speak up. So, for example, if you do value local farmers and small businesses, we have to speak up and support them. And we've absolutely seen, haven't we, since 2020, an attack on small businesses, certainly on farmers. We've seen this massive transference of wealth to already phenomenally wealthy people. How do we stop this? I feel like we're a snowball rolling down a hill, and we're going to end up with no farms and no independent businesses. How do we stop it, Jane?
Well, no one person can stop it. That's the thing. We can all do our bit. Of course, we can campaign, we can write, we can make our feelings known. But, what we actually do, I speak to so many people and say, look, I go to my local farmers market on a Saturday morning and they say, yeah, that's quite an effort, isn't it? I go to the local supermarket. It's those small actions that add up, and us actually talking about what we do and why we do it, which is why I write what I do and broadcast what I do, why I go to the farmers market, why I pay for my goods there in cash. Yes. This is why I'm doing these things. And actually people start to say, and just this week, one of my neighbours was there at the farmers market and she'd come along. So I think, doing what we say we believe in and then telling other people that we're doing it and why we're doing it, I think we can only start there.
That's brilliant. That's like a real deliberate action, isn't it? I think and I think that's so important, that because I think a lot of us are still recovering from the whole C-19 period. Obviously, the coercion that we were put through, the fear, the separation from our loved ones, all of these insane, totalitarian, draconian rules that were heaped on us, that some are still in play, which is really odd. So how do we go about recovery? Because one of the things that you do is as you say, you help people and organizations to manage change, challenge, and crisis. Well, we've suffered that, haven't we? And people are still struggling. On a very simple level, if somebody just were to come to you today, say, I'm really struggling, I'm unemployed, I don't know what to do, I have all of these ideas, where would you just start with an individual?
Actually, the place we can all start is by listening to others. One of the challenges, and particularly in times of conflict that we have, and we've all got our ideas about how the world works and what we think is driving it. And we're very keen, as you're just asking me, to push forward those ideas. How do we tell people? But actually, the place we start is listening to others. Let me hear your narrative, your story, what impacts you, rather than tell you what I think and what I think you should do about it. And that's the place we start in mediation. And I want to hear all about you, your story. And the key thing I want to hear is what matters most to you and why, and who matters most to you and why. And I want to really hear that. And then from there, I can then, it's rather like coaching. I can take you through the journey. It says, well, how can you build on that?
I'm going to ask you a question now, which may be a short question to a big answer. So bear with me. And that is, some of the people that you're talking, you are clearly very clued up about what's going on in terms of the attack on farmers and small bit, everything, all of those things, C-19. But some of the people that you're talking to, certainly in the corporations, won't necessarily be clued up, right? How do you know the difference between, so for example, because absolutely, I believe that a lot of depression and problems that people have, like negative problems, are associated with the problems in the world, certainly not being aware of what's going on. Because if you don't know what's going on, but you can feel it in your solar plexus, it must impact you, right? How do you cross that gap with people?
So I believe I'm seeing this a lot. I believe a lot of people are impacted by the sort of conflict that's going on in the world. It's impacting them, as you say, unconsciously. It's then reflecting in their behavior in the workplace, in how they behave towards others. And I don't think you can necessarily, as we've been talking about, open up the sort of whole world to, the world of understanding to everybody. You're
overwhelming, right?
Get them to see everything. What we have to understand is that, and I have to understand that this is how I see things, but maybe you don't see things that way. This is my understanding. Let me share that with you and why I see it that way. And it's a slow journey. People, all of us, have a different view of the world. And that's because, as we talked about at the beginning, because of what we've gone through in our childhood, as we've grown up in organization, you know, we've all got, as we say, and Morris has got, we've all got our own backpack on. And in our backpack is everything that's happened to us so far, and therefore all the values and attitudes that come with that. So we're all different. We've all got different stuff in that backpack. And that's what we have to understand. That's the first thing we have to understand.
So we're all different and we all have different stuff in that backpack, as you say. But I studied psychology. But we also know that there are human ways of behaving, reacting and responding, right? So presumably that is also something that you can work with, because, you know, obviously you've just discussed about not necessarily rectifying that internal conflict as a consequence of the environments we find ourselves in, but almost, is it about getting people to face up to things that they'd rather not see when it comes to conflict resolution?
Yes, there's that. You know, that is that murky swamp of reality, accepting the brutal reality. But the other thing we do in conflict resolution is to shift from demonizing to humanizing.
Oh,
so that's
big
the
shift.
Key problem in, and as I describe it, you know, supposing I drive down to the village here where I live, and somebody cuts me up at the roundabout, and I sort of shout and swear at them and make a fist, and then I actually look through the window and go, oh, that's lovely Mary from next door. I've immediately switched from demonizing that driver to humanizing that driver. And that's because I have a relationship with Mary. I know and love her, and I know she wouldn't have done that intentionally. What happens in our brains immediately we have a conflict is we make an assumption, an inference, or a judgment. We judge that other person, and we immediately make the highest level inference. In other words, I'm sure she did it deliberately. Yeah. I'm sure she was being mean or trying to cut me up at the roundabout, or didn't care. But when we can step back from that and humanize the other person, and when we listen to someone else and hear their story, what's in their backpack, they become a human being to us. And that's why the listening bit is the most important. How do we move to humanizing someone else and relating to them?
Do you think that we're ever too old to change?
No, I don't. I think we've all got the possibility to. I think so many people just haven't had the opportunity to really explore. And the thing I think has happened to me in the last 4 years is the opportunity to find people that I relate to and to have those deeper conversations. And I just think for me, you know, in some ways, the last 4 years have been brilliant because I have found my tribe. I found people that I could really talk to in depth, where before perhaps we were having very functional conversations. And I think now we're open to exploring things, or some of us are more open to exploring things. And then if we can find the skill to do that with others and help them explore more deeply, then we're moving in the right direction.
The last segment on the show, I always like to sort of bring it back to the person, and whether it's a kind of spiritual note that I end on. And today I'm going to be talking about finding inner peace. And I think this is something that you have an understanding about. And I think it was in your newsletter today. You talk about signal, not noise. Was it in your newsletter today?
Yes, yeah.
That's right. And so talk to us about that, because I think it's very hard, isn't it? With all of the distractions. I mean, one of the first things I want to say to people is digital detox, please, because it's so vital. How vital do you think a digital detox is?
Oh, absolutely vital.
Coming at us on a constant, isn't it, Jane?
It's constant, you know, and that's why we are completely overwhelmed with information, with noise. And how can you think clearly? That's the problem. You see, one of the challenges for me in doing the work that I do is there's an awful lot of information. Perhaps it's legal information, but I think the challenge is to cut up. What I'm always trying to do in my work is to simplify things, cut down the information. Say, what's this about in a nutshell? How do you just describe this in a nutshell, rather than, you know, let's explore all this complex information. And that's what we all need to do, is to cut down the noise. And then what's the signal?
You're very clear. You're very clear. I mean, the thing is that sometimes, like, not so much now, because I have to say, I was saying to my daughter yesterday, I love aging. I love maturity because things that used to bother me no longer have the power to bother me. And I can, for the most part, separate what is important, what to prioritize. But every now and again, I get lost in that as well, just like everybody else, right? Because it is so noisy, isn't it? And one of the things that I don't do now is I don't go onto social media first thing in the morning because it's like inviting everybody into my room first thing in my, it is, isn't it though?
It's the biggest thing. And, you know, I'm a grandmother as well, actually. So, you know, trying to think about what the world's going to be like by my little granddaughters is one of the reasons I'm so interested. I just think you've got to look for one of the challenges, and maybe a thought to leave your listeners with is, let's think 7 generations into the future. What if we were to imagine that what we're doing now, and one of the lessons in the book is about, what if I planted an acorn for the future? What if I planted something that would grow into an oak tree that would, you know, represent what I believe in the future? If you can think that far ahead, it's not just about what am I going to have for tea or where. I just get so upset with people thinking about, where am I going on holiday next? I went into the supermarket this weekend, they got Easter eggs already on the shelf. Okay, but why? We're just thinking about
fast forwarding our life constantly, isn't it? But all of that is about consumerism, isn't it? It's like Christmas is in 3 months' time. You know, get your decks out, go. Everything is about consumerism. We discovered that last week, that so-called, you know, Blue Monday, that was created by a travel agent because very cynically, he very cynically worked out that was a rough period after Christmas and everybody's looking for a holiday. Can you? What's that? Can you flip through the book on camera? Says Drumstick. They're loving this. Look, I'm going to put, I promise, people are saying, can I please put links to your work and your books in here? The Bridge of Courage, The Crossroad, there's so much. It's a beautiful book, highly recommended. Thank you for leaving us with that note, Jane. I think that's so important because I think an ultimate act of kind of selflessness is to actually plant a tree that you're never, ever going to witness necessarily grow into life, right?
That's it. How can I plant a tree in whose shade I will never sit?
Vanessa says there is a wonderful future ahead. You're making everybody feel happy, which is great. I presume that when you walk into rooms, people are a lot happier by the time you finish with them, right? I'm sure that's the case.
Well, I've got 4 values, which are listen, learn, love, and laugh. And I do think laughter, humor, and humility is one of the most important things we can bring into a room.
Name of your dentist, please, Jane. Yani's got fabulous teeth. Can you behave yourself, Craig? This is what they're absolutely outrageous. They really are. In time to come.
Well, I can tell you, I'm going back to the. I did have to wear a lot of braces actually, so I wasn't born with these teeth either. They had
so you corrected. You made corrections. There's nothing wrong with that. Thank you, Jane. Such positive vibes. And hairdresser says, Christy, will you behave? You're all examining the way this woman looks, and yes, she looks fabulous. Yes, she does. But the thing is, Jane, I don't need to tell you this, and that is if we're kind of sorted inside, our outside naturally glows, doesn't it? It just does. That we've been gifted with all this at birth.
I think it is about energy and vibration, and that's not to say I wake up feeling positive all the time, but you do have to. Again, that's something you have to sort of think about and, you know, take control of, if you like.
Lovely to have you with us this morning. Everybody, this is Jane Gunn. She is, in fact, the barefoot mediator, and we love her. We love her lots. Take good care of yourself, Jane. Lovely to have you with us.
Sonia, and
wonderful.
Everybody.
Isn't she wonderful? Yes, she's wonderful. I can see your comments. Yes, she's wonderful. Linda, what a brilliant ace recommendation. She's fabulous. She is fabulous. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for so far. Wow. What guests? I didn't have enough time to talk to you in between guests, in between the Colonel and Jane. But the Colonel, well, she just blew my mind. Class. Thank you, Jane, says Randy. Class, says Craig. There's no problems, only solutions. I'm loving this. Good vibes. Create smiles. Oh, yes, it does. Good guess, says Sid. Loving her. She is hot. George, is she? She is hot. Yes, she is. We're all like batteries. Stay charged and positive. Oh, yes, indeed. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, lovely Jane. Great guest today. Thank you, Heldu. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Bit of brightness in between the chem clouds. Well, we try, don't we? Thank you, Kiwi. Thank you. Fantastic guest. I truly, truly appreciate that. Right. Let's do a big one. 2 years ago today, on the 27th of January, British mum of two, Nicola Bulley, disappeared after dropping her daughters at school, then taking her usual dog walk along the River Wyre in St Michael's-on-Wyre in Lancashire, England. Her disappearance literally happened around this time. I'm going to run through the timeline. Now, the story of Nicola Bulley is relatable for so many people. I used to drop my daughter at her primary school and then I walked the dog. I and many others could relate. I didn't follow it too closely at the time, although given the massive interest in both legacy media and social media, I had no choice much of the time to acknowledge it because Nicola Bulley was everywhere, which was interesting in itself. I'm going to bring up an image of Nicola. Here she is. Sadly, a woman going missing and found dead is an all too common occurrence. It's interesting, not even because Nicola was found in water. That too, as I will reveal and talk about, is also a common occurrence. But it's an interesting story because of the mass attention given to it. And because with all the scrutiny it has been subject to, it is absolutely clear for many people that this story does not make sense. It does not add up. So the timeline has always been intriguing. So let's following it. So we were told on the 27th of January, 2023, that 9:10 a.m. was the last positive sighting, and a witness saw her at a distance. But I want to go back a little bit before that, because I think you have to go back to the beginning as much as you humanly can. So some of the things that we've heard was that a couple of weeks prior to Nicola's disappearance, the police were involved, that there may well have been some kind of domestic situation that was happening in her home. But on the morning of the 27th of January, Nicola was said to have left home with her two daughters, aged 6 and 9, dropped them off at school, engaged in a brief conversation with another parent around 15 minutes later. At nearly 8:45, she then took her spaniel Willow to walk along a path by the River Wyre, a common route that she had taken many times with her dog. At 8:50, a dog walker who knew her saw her. Their parents interacted briefly before they parted ways. This is what we're told by the witnesses. At 8:53 a.m., Miss Bulley sent an email to her boss, followed by a message to her friend 6 minutes later. And this, I think, is really interesting because one of the things that we've heard, because she was actually found 3 weeks later and she was dead, and there was a major search for her. But I think what was interesting was one of the things was, did she kill herself? Well, the thing is, people who kill themselves generally don't have communications about forward events that they're planning. Certainly wouldn't necessarily consider sending an email to a boss about updates. That wouldn't happen. 9:01, she logged on to a work Microsoft Teams call. And as I say, the last known sighting of her by a second witness was said to be about 9:10. By 9:20 a.m., her phone was back in the area of the bench before the Teams call ended 10 minutes later, with her mobile phone remaining logged on after the call. At 9:33 a.m., another dog walker found her phone on a bench beside the river with her dog darting between the two. And that, to all intents and purposes, was pretty much all we knew for the most part. And what happened was that somebody who'd found the dog and the phone, they contacted the school because they knew her and knew Nicola's children. And the school contacted her partner, Paul Ansell. And let me bring up an image of Nicola and Paul. Yeah, we're going to talk about the interviews with the husband as well. And what happened was Lancashire Constabulary, the police force overseeing it, by the next day they had deployed drones, helicopters, police searches, and police search dogs as part of the major missing persons operation. Lancashire police said almost immediately that it was a working hypothesis that Miss Bulley may have fallen into the River Wyre, but those close to her were completely uncertain. And the more that the story got out, so were the wider public. Miss Bulley's friend Emma White, she immediately cast doubts on the police theory that Nicola had fallen into the river. She told TV cameras that it was based on limited information. And then in a Facebook post, Nicola's sister, Louise Cunningham, urged people to keep an open mind. She said there's no evidence whatsoever that her sister had fallen into the river. And then on February 19th, just over 3 weeks later, at 2:32 p.m., Lancashire police revealed a body had been found in the river And that was about a mile from where Miss Bully had first disappeared from the bench, where the phone was and where her dog Willow was. And the following day, the police force confirmed that the body had been identified as Miss Bully. Paul Ansell, her partner, said days after, "You don't vanish into thin air. Something happened that day. Something." Yes, indeed it did. And this is a case where I believe, even 2 years on, and even though there has been an inquest, and even though there is an official narrative, I believe it is absolutely vital to remain open-minded about what really happened. The moment a case is made of public interest, it's for a reason. Okay, so just break it down. Do I believe she took her own life? No, absolutely not. Do I believe she had been taken? Possibly. Had she left the spot by herself? Had she had enough of her life? And I want to talk also about the criticisms towards the police and their behaviour, which actually was absolutely reprehensible, but the official inquiry found that it wasn't necessarily. First of all, there was a reason why people turned their attentions to her partner and wondered whether there was an involvement with him. 60% of murdered women are killed by current or former partners. It would have been absolutely remiss of the police and of people not to have said, is it possible that her partner could have been involved? Of course, he had to be considered. His phones were looked at, his computers were looked at. He was seen as a person of interest. And many people believe this was a psyop. Now, we've heard today about psyops, about state-operated psyops for a purpose, right? And if it was a psyop, we're also going to break down why it could potentially have been so. And that doesn't mean the event doesn't happen just for the state to use it. That doesn't mean Teams call would be a great decoy by someone sinister. Mr. Mack, I always say, what is the proof that it was Nicola on that Teams call anyway? Because she had parts of it turned off. They couldn't see her, right? But right, so let me work through this, because what I did over the weekend was I asked people on social media what they thought about it, because this was one of those very uniquely social media stories, and the attack actually on social media users was in part grotesque. Now, I'm not saying that some people aren't outrageous in their behavior on social media. Of course they are, but it doesn't mean that you should enforce laws based on the behavior of a few. And I believe that Nicola's case assisted the online harms bill. Much was made of, excuse me, let me just have some water. Much was made of online detectives interfering in the investigation, which was actually a nonsense. No respectable police force should be influenced in any way by online comments. The same thing was said when Brit teen Jay Slater went missing on Tenerife last year, and that's because there is an agenda to shut down social media, or certainly to limit our use of it. So absolutely, social media was under attack, no doubt about it. The senior investigating officer said that there was no third party involved, communicated this to the coroner at the inquest. But I want to start working through what your thoughts were about this, okay? And also there were some really unique things done. For example, the police were given 48-hour dispersal notice, which gave them extra powers to essentially ban social media, to ban people going close to the scene. And bear in mind that the police did not seal off the crime scene. Right from the beginning, it was a mess, right from the beginning, it was an absolute mess. And the crime scene was not sealed off. They said, well, enough people have already gone through this. Lancashire police were pretty much a failure, but believe me when I say this, the official inquiry was only critical with them on a couple of things, and that included the releasing of personal information about Nicola Bully. Lancashire police, and I have no idea why they did this, even to this day, other than just appalling policing. They first of all started off with the press playing this kind of game of cat and mouse. We know stuff, but we don't want to release it. And when they did release it, they said that she may have issues with alcohol, and that there were problems with her being menopausal. Well, I mean, just shoot me. I've been through the menopause, right? I didn't feel like killing myself, and most people don't. And actually, it was truly, truly appalling what they had put out about her. There was absolutely no need to put any of that about her. So many people go missing. Why were these cases so blown up? Robert, that is exactly why it's so important to cover it, because we know that in the UK, one person goes missing every 90 seconds. The vast majority of them return within 24 hours. But that still leaves a sizable chunk of people who never return. Then, of course, we would be completely remiss to talk about this story without mentioning Peter Folding. Peter Folding, expert diver, had claimed he, without a doubt, had found Nicola Bulley's body within 6 minutes. Now, this is a man who was absolutely thrown under the bus by the police, by the inquiry, by mainstream media. And what happened was Peter Folding was asked by Nicola Bulley's family, because he's an expert and he has a company and they are experts at diving for bodies in rivers. And he was asked for help from he and his company, Specialist Group International. They arrived in St. Michael's on Wyre to assist the search on the 6th of February. They said they initially found no sign of her in a section of the river that day. However, the following day, police told Mr. Folding's team to scour what the diver called the hot zone. Right. And what we are now hearing is that 6 minutes after beginning the search at 10:34 a.m., the diver said he spotted a significant target that appeared, this is Peter Folding, from my experience, to take human form, which was about 75 meters downstream from the bench. Mr. Folding said he called Lancashire Police to tell them of his findings in less than 20 minutes, sending an image of what he had seen, requesting that divers be put in the waters immediately to check the area. However, he claimed that this request to dive was refused, alleging he was told that Northwest Underwater Search Unit would conduct that dive that afternoon instead. So he wasn't allowed to, he and his specialists were not allowed to, but there was other people that were going to. And then the police wrote it off, saying, oh, that's just something under a tree, it wasn't a body, etc., etc. Right? So sad. So sad. Yes, Randy. And I'm going to come back to Peter Folding, but as I say, the police involved were Lancashire Police, who have been subject to a great deal of necessary criticism, and rightfully so. The constabulary concluded that there was no evidence of either suspicious activity or third-party involvement in the disappearance. And then when she was found on the 19th of February, it was like, well, the constabulary got it right. Who said on the 19th of February, Nicola's body was found in the river by a man and woman walking in the area about 1 mile downstream of where she had last been. The inquest, which concluded in June 2023, determined that Nicola's death was due to accidental drowning. Well, let me tell you, many people do not agree with that. Imagine her poor family. Exactly, Frank. Imagine her poor family. And today is going to be hard for them. I mean, I cannot ignore the fact that a sizable chunk of people do not necessarily believe what the family have to say. I think it would be really remiss of me to do this report without acknowledging that there are a sizable chunk of people who had a lot of problems with the pronouncements that the family made in public, and like, for example, when Paul was being interviewed by Dan Walker from Channel 5, and he talked about how it was a normal Friday getting the kids ready for school. And it was odd because I've literally never heard this before, but he described the getting the children ready for school as carnage. Odd expression, but you know, people go through odd emotions, right? Benny said, I feel terrible for the husband losing your wife, then being accused of being responsible. Right. There was a report. Oh, I missed that. Narrative. So let me read some of the comments from all over social media. I want to start with Jackie on Instagram. Good morning to you, Jackie. Says, it doesn't all add up. Why unsolved for so long when her body was a mile away from where her phone and dog were found? And how could she drown in shallow waters? And Anne on Instagram said, the whole thing felt very off to me. I've no idea what happened, but I'm certain it wasn't what we are told. And I have to agree. Okay. And so in terms of Peter Folding, I think he's been the fall guy for this. And I would like to speak with Peter Folding. A great deal of criticism about him, mostly from the police and mostly from the police inquiry. He was also struck off the National Crime Agency database after being on it for 20 years. He had previously said on TV that there was no sign of Nicola. At the time, I trusted the police that they had searched, he said. It was when he was going through his files leading up to the inquest that he saw clearly what there was, and he was not invited to the inquest. And he's now amongst people calling for Nicola's Law. And Nicola's Law is to oversee the work of a coroner. The coroner is one of the highest judges in the land. They are not open to question, but they should be, shouldn't they? Right? It was definitely weird and didn't add up. I love you too, George. And Colin, is there a GoFundMe for Paul still up and running? That's interesting. And GCR said, absolutely feel that with Peter Folding. They absolutely went after him. I hope nothing bad ever happens to me. I know, Frank. I mean, that's the thing, right? But here's the thing. If something bad were to happen to me, I would hope that people wouldn't automatically follow the state narrative, because we know they lie and we know that they use tragedies for their own ends. Well, I've already given you one reason why they would potentially use this as a psyop, and that was to enforce new measures online in social media. That's already been done. It's already been done. And it was informed by the disappearance of Nicola Bulley and how we were told people reacted online. So that's already one thing, straight off the bat. Deborah said to me, it stinks. She found out something and she was got rid of. And that is what many people believe. And I do actually feel for Peter Folding. I believe that his intentions were good. And the only thing where he went wrong, and this again wasn't his fault, he wasn't being advised what he should and shouldn't say. And he talked too much to the media for the liking of the police. That was the problem. And I was critical of him at some stage, because I felt that he was muddying the waters as it was happening. But actually, on reflection, I think that this was someone who went there with a good intention. He was doing it for free, brought in his people for free, right? And he saw something and he wanted to go further and they wouldn't let him, and he was prevented from doing so. And then when, the stuff hit the fan, he was the one that they blamed. Seems wrong. I have a river near me, hardly go near it now. Well, Stephen, that might be for a reason. The Hungarian twins, Daniel. Now, this I think is very interesting, because one of the things that people said was, why her? What about her? What was it about her that made people so interested? And Joaquim on X, good morning to you, Joaquim, said, for example, women found dead in water, more than you'd think. Surely something sinister. And I think this is just the UK. Nicola Bulley, Gaynor Lord, Lucy Charles, Victoria Taylor, Katrina Winters, Shannon Canning. I could go on. And Joanne, good morning to you, Joanne, said very similar case is Victoria Taylor, 34 years from Norton, North Yorkshire. She was a nurse in a care home, partner a young daughter, went missing on 30th September 2024 after leaving home at 9 a.m. Body found in River Derwent, 22nd of October 2024, last seen at Riverside Playground. Her belongings were found on the bank. No explanation as to how or why. Tragic. And everything Sokra said, thank you for discussing this. This case has never sat right with me. There are other women that have been found dead in rivers in the UK. They could all be connected, right? And people did ask, why her? Jess said, why aren't the two Hungarian sisters missing from Aberdeen getting as much press coverage? And Zupcon said, why did this story make the news? In real life, approximately 3 people a week fall in rivers and drown in the UK, yet within hours of her disappearance, she was national news. The story and the police handling of this case absolutely stinks. We were lied to as usual. And that is my point. Some people have said to me, do you really need to cover this story today? Just leave her family alone. Well, first, I'm a journalist. I mean, if I worked on that basis, I would cover nothing, because I apply the same rules to everybody, everything I cover. Right. And that is, if it's a story of public interest, then I will cover it. And going back to what I said, and that is, if something were to happen to me, don't you dare believe the official narrative. I want you to keep looking at it and digging at it and see. Do you see what I'm saying? And I feel that that is my duty. And Christine said, water is used. Oh, no, this is Jay. Water is used in rituals, and I cannot rule that out. And a lovely lady made this comment on Instagram. For some reason, her comment hasn't copied over, but I acknowledge what you have to say. I absolutely do. And I want to continue going through. This is a big story. I think this is a big story, and I think it's important. And many people have called it a psyop, right? Glenn O'Connor on X said, did she even exist? Every photo of her looked the same, perfect hair and makeup. And I don't think we can rule out the fact that a lot of her images do actually look AI generated. I'm not saying for a second that she didn't exist. I'm saying that her images look AI generated. Truth Signal said, start at the beginning. Proof she existed. Proof she was at the school. Proof she was at the river. Proof she was recovered only once. And the autopsy was legit. Kelly Belly said it was a cover-up from start to finish. Cover-up. Now, I believe she existed, and I'm working on that basis. I hear you, Shalini. Not everything is a psyop, and that is important, right? That is important. No, Emma, I'm not saying that you suspect my family no matter what, but you certainly, if anything happens to me, you certainly must look at people around me. You absolutely must. This is why I go on and on about Madeleine McCann, because we fail to look at the people around her. You must look at the people around. You must. I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that I saw online about her family, by the way. I don't agree with that. And I'm not coming from that angle on this, but I am acknowledging when I put out to the public, what do you think about this? And some people come back and say it's a psyop. What do you want me to do? Just completely ignore them? No, that's not how we work around here. We work on the basis that everybody is entitled to an opinion, right? Everybody's entitled to an opinion. The police were utterly abysmal. Anne-Marie said the police behaved disgracefully when saying she was a menopausal woman with a drink problem. The whole situation surrounding Nicola Bulley was bizarre. And I think that's the important point, is that the situation is bizarre. It doesn't add up. Crafty Mother on X said police were wrong to release personal information to calm social commentators, which leads on to keeping the ghoul, Mark Williams Thomas, and his connections away from all vulnerable families, formal investigations, and high-profile cases. And I couldn't agree more. Mark Williams Thomas is an ex-cop, and he, he's a media cop these days, and he always shows up. He showed up for Jay Slater. He showed up for Nicola Bulley. He's been all over Madeleine McCann, and he's not somebody that I would trust in any way. Not at all. Not at all. Craig said our trust is shot to hell, and that is the problem. Our trust is shot to hell. So we are forced to question. We are forced to question. And so Justice for Nicola Bulley on X said the truth has not been told. So many red flags ignored by those in power. It should have been an open verdict. Even the coroner said he didn't know how she ended up in the river. Stop just believing what you're told. And that is the point. That is the point. And Chris, Seeker of Truth on X, has said he's published on Substack some 100+ posts on this particular scripted hoax. That's how Chris chooses to describe it early on. But this is the open letter to Home Secretary published May 2023. This was before the fraudulent staged inquest. Chris is not mincing his words there. And I've talked to Chris before. And I looked at the open letter to the then Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. CC's in the coroner and chief constable at Lancashire Police clearly states that he believes the findings of Nicola's body on 19th of February was a staged event, that the pictures were actually taken the day before. And he alleges that a detective superintendent of Lancs Police was complicit in the hoax and cover-up. These are serious claims. These are serious claims. Very serious claims. And so we have to wonder. I don't for a second believe that this is going to be the end of us looking at it, and neither should it be. Because until things make sense, then how can we put them to bed? That human beings need information. And one of the reasons that a lot of people ran with crazy information about this story was because of lack of decent information. And I was reading the blog of Sarah. Sarah, I've forgotten your surname. She's been on with us before. And she actually did a really good blog. And I'm going to put a link in the description below. And she did a really good blog about I think it was the Channel 5 documentary. And the Channel 5 documentary into Nicola Bulley was basically a legacy media assault on social media, an attack on it, right? It was definitely an attack on it. And it's really good, some of the things that Sarah says. And she says, so what is the end game of a psychological operation such as this? There are a few possibilities, and it could be a combination of several. Firstly, vulnerable little menopausal women should go get that medication. Good point. Do not risk becoming drowned, victim of your uncontrollable hormones and addiction to Chardonnay, because they portrayed her in such a heinous way. Pop some pills. That's one of the take-home messages. Or how about the tracking? Nicola was already wearing a Fitbit, which gave some intelligence on her vital statistics. But how much less painful it would have been if Paul could have simply hopped onto his laptop or attended a locating centre and had them scanned to find out where his errant missus had got to. These are excellent points, Sarah. Excellent points. I mean, Emma, when you say her family won't ever get peace, forever clouded in doubt, I mean, there's nothing I can say to that. It sounds to me like you feel we shouldn't ever talk about these things. Well, I absolutely disagree with you. And I will continue talking about anything like this that simply does not make sense. And this simply does not make sense. And then on top of that, Do you remember after the inquest, the chief of Lancashire Police died at the age of 50, and they said due to natural causes? Who dies at the age of 50 due to natural causes? Would somebody like to tell me that? And also, the coroner has gone on to be a media coroner, by the way, with his own program on Channel 5. So there you go. Everything should be questioned. Everything. Absolutely. Cider guy. Everything. What's this? Hunting Swan said we can talk about it, but saying she looks like AI is really too insulting for her family members, in my opinion. Well, you are entitled to your opinion. You're entitled to your opinion. And I'm actually thinking that the pictures were digitally altered at the very least, right? I'm thinking that because they don't actually look. There's certainly, and there's another one which doesn't look real at all. This is not about being insulting to her family. This is not. This is covering it from every angle. This is called wake up for a reason, and that is we look at things that mainstream media wouldn't necessarily look at, and that includes the potential for it being a psyop. We just talked to a colonel earlier who's just shown us huge, vast information about how psyop works. But here's one thing that I think is unexplored and should be, and that is the man in black. And the man in black appeared when Peter Folder and his team were there, had been there previously. And Peter Folding, rather, had got the Sun newspaper photographer to take pictures of him. They passed it on to Lancs Police. And it's interesting because people who have committed crimes often go back to the scene of crime to immerse themselves in the crime scene. Who is the man in black? Who is the man in black? I want to know. We all do. That is an unknown. That is an unknown. We should know. We should know. Okay. So there you go. Those are my thoughts. Rest in peace, Nicola Bulley. I absolutely believe she existed. I believe that there are a lot of questions around it. I don't believe the official narrative. No, I don't. The men in black. Indeed, there was a man in black. There really was. And so something's wrong. Something is definitely wrong. I just I struggle with it. My feeling is that she was potentially taken and then placed in the river 3 weeks later. Mary, I'm going to talk about the two sisters in Scotland on Friday. Yes, I am. Kiwi says, I hate the idea of people dying without justice. It's good to have a conversation, even if we never get to the truth. At least it shows people care about the truth. Absolutely. And you can only care about the truth by being prepared to unpack it. A couple of people in the comments, they're like, don't talk about this. Don't mention that. Why not? That's part of the problem we're dealing with. That's part of the problem we're dealing with. We're not allowed to talk about this, that, and the other. But rest in peace, Nicola Bulley. 2 years ago today. 2 years ago today. Very sad indeed. Very sad indeed. Right. I want to move on to something else. Sean, do you recognize your geoengineering pictures? Do you recognize them? These were taken on January the 21st. Sean said, greeted by the return of chemtrails with a vengeance this morning. It's so in your face, they don't give a damn. Of course, no government has made it illegal, so it's not surprising that they don't care. There's a lot of them going on there, Sean. A lot of them. And I think I also have one from Linda. There you go, Linda. Photo taken this morning, which was also January the 21st in Oakley, Bedfordshire. These are stark, these pictures, aren't they? Look at some of Sean's pictures. Look at them. Absolute stark. This is happening to us. Jan wants to know what Trump has to say about chemtrails. Harper's restarted. That's quite a lattice. Yes. Track everyone, Frank. Yeah, Frank, that appears to be one of also the take-home messages, isn't it, from the Nicola Bulley story. Thank you for your geoengineering pictures as ever, people. Thank you. I truly appreciate that. And I want to briefly touch upon this, if I can, our curious world. That is a house and lots of other things jutting out the side of a cliff in China, right? This is my first offering for our curious world. And in fact, I've even got an Alice in Wonderland cup to accompany me on this, right? I feel that the world is just so dark sometimes. And I want you to send me what you consider some of the wonderful, beautiful mysteries of the world. And let's talk about them a little bit, right? This is really quite incredible. I don't know if you've noticed how the Chinese have a thing about living in the air. I'll give you an example of some properties in the air. These are many thousands of feet up, but Chinese seem to love that, right? They live amongst the clouds. Lots of properties that are built on the side of caves, and in places they're difficult to reach. But this one, which is actually one of my favorites, is it's in the mountains of Guzhai in China. It's a very mysterious temple under the cliffs. There is no one around the temple. There's only a cliff path to reach it. It's very, very narrow. It's understood that there's still a 17-year-old man living in seclusion there. And I've seen him interviewed. And part of his job, according to this old man, he came here more than 90 years ago, which I don't know how that happens when you're 70, but this is his story. He came here more than 90 years ago. Maybe the belief is that the people who came before him kind of brought him in spirit. He said he's been guarding this temple alone for more than 30 years. And it's really literally like being isolated from the world, isn't it? It's difficult to access. Goodness knows how they built it. It's very difficult to get there. First, you have to climb over mountains. Then you have to walk the most primitive old road finally to get there. It's remote, but people do go to visit him. And there's just something quite amazing about elderly people like that, the resilience that they have. I would live there in a heartbeat. Would you? I think it's quite phenomenal. I've got another image of it. I think that should show you a little bit about it as well. Let me just check it out. Let me see if I've got it on my, I might not actually have. No, I haven't, but I think you can make enough from it there. And what I actually will do is I'm going to put a link to this woman's channel because she goes to loads of places like this. It's absolutely fascinating. And I mean, I am fascinated by it. The idea that somebody would, I mean, he's like cut off from everything, right? Don't think for a second that he's got TV and internet up there. That's not happening. Emma wants me to do a deep dive into the propaganda we've been fed about life in China. Well, I would suggest that this man has gotten far away from that. Marcuson wouldn't want to be there in an earthquake. Patty would have a problem because she sleepwalks. No sleepwalking. And this I think is key right here. I love that quote. People are so adaptable. It's wonderful. Hunting Swan, I agree with you. We are adaptable. When people lose a limb, they kind of make do with the rest of their body, right? And so, yeah. People are adaptable. People are amazing when we want to be. And I think this is kind of testament to that. And I love it. Frankly, I love it. And I wonder if I can just bring in something else very, 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 very quickly. If I've got it, you know how it goes, people. But I want to bring in here it is. Claire, one of our wonderful viewers. Not only is this where she watches Wake Up, but she watches it with a Wake Up mug. Claire has one of the singularly coolest front rooms I think I've ever seen. I don't know if you can see the details of that, people. Claire, your living room is so cool. It's insanely cool. And that actually looks like a moon up in the corner of Claire's room. How gorgeous is that? Send me your pictures of where you watch Wake Up, and even with your mug, I would appreciate that. Claire, I love that image. I love that image. Moving on now, we are now coming to the end of our show, darling people. In an uncertain world, find inner peace, right? And I think inner peace is so important. You know, we're just talking about it to a degree with Jane. I mean, to a degree, yeah, digital detox haven, Craig, that's exactly it. And inner peace is so important. And the thing about inner peace, the clue is in the title. It's an inside job. It's something you develop from within. It's about acknowledging and accepting your thoughts and emotions, about living fully in the present and adopting practices that nurture your well-being. It can be as simple as taking a few moments each day to yourself. I don't know, meditate, sit in the garden with a cup of tea, whatever. It can be that simple. Some people become so attuned to locking into their inner peace that they can literally switch from one mode to another. That may take some years working at it. But, you know, the thing about inner peace is it's like a muscle. You keep practicing and eventually it will work properly for you. Okay. And the thing is, an example of inner peace is, as an example, you'll know you have it the next time you face a challenging situation. When you have inner peace, you don't react impulsively. right? And you don't let the anxiety overwhelm you either. You'll be able to maintain a state of calm and balance even in difficult situations. And the thing is, once you change yourself and change how you react to turmoil, you can start to change the world around you. Because once you change, the world, the people around you can no longer interact with you the same way that they did. They can't. Inner peace is a state of tranquility, but it is a state of mind as well. It's when you feel at ease with yourself and at ease in your own skin, right? It's about as I say, about being fully present, about being comfortable. And as a consequence of you doing that, what will happen is you will be less negatively impacted by the world, by what people say. Even if I say something that upsets you, if you have inner peace, you'll be just like, well, that's Sonia. Let it float over me. Or I accept that she's got a different point of view and I have a different point of view as well. That's also inner peace. Okay. And the thing is that when you have inner peace, you accept yourself pretty much completely, right? And that is your strengths, your flaws, your desires, your dreams, everything that makes you who you are. And you will also feel more accepting of the world as well. I mean, that is a reality. But absolute, first and foremost, digital detox, absolutely vital. It's absolutely vital. And not right now, because you're in the middle of watching Wake Up and we're about to come to the end of our show, but absolutely vital. I make sure that I have at least one day a week, and it's usually Saturday and sometimes Tuesday, where I am away from the digitals as much as I humanly can be. Excuse me. I won't go on X. I won't go on social media. I won't barely check my emails because I need a break, and we all need a break from time to time, right? And I think the man on the hill, he's not going to have a problem with this, is he? Not going to have a problem with this. I'd love to have a conversation with him because I bet that his understanding, his spirituality and his overview of the world is greater than most other people. Anyway, the other thing about achieving inner peace is you have to live in the present, right? You have to live in the present. If you're stuck in the past, a past that you can't change or a future you can't actually do anything about other than prepare for it, but the present moment is all we truly have. So you need to embrace it. So embrace this moment. I'm embracing you. I'm embracing you listening to this, and cultivate a positive mindset. That is absolutely vital. Our mind is a powerful tool. And honestly, if you're having a negative thought, immediately switch it for a positive one. Because the thing about a mind is it cannot hold two thoughts simultaneously. So make your thought a positive one. Why are you doing this to yourself? So many people are literally harming themselves. They think of some of the most awful, horrible things, and they sit in that soup for lengthy periods of time. Don't do it to yourself. Wherever you are receiving this message, be that on X, on YouTube, on Rumble, on Spotify, whether you're listening live or whether you're listening on playback, this is for you. Live in the present. Live in the present. And it can be something as simple as when you're doing your sort of day-to-day tasks. When I'm vacuuming, I often come up with ideas for this show, right? Or when I'm peeling vegetables, I come up with ideas for this show. And one of the reasons is because I fully immerse myself in the experience. Believe it or not, when I'm vacuuming, I'm focusing on the vacuuming and vacuuming. And then oddly, what happens is all these creative ideas then start coming in. And love yourself. Please love yourself. I cannot state that enough. You have to love yourself. If you don't love yourself, you've got no chance of anybody else loving you, right? And not really, not really unconditionally, because you're always putting up barriers to loving you, right? And loving yourself is not an easy journey. It's not an easy journey at all. But the aim is to learn to appreciate yourself. That really is the aim. And practice self-care, whatever that is. My self-care is nice long bath, good stuff in the bath to ease my body, candles, lovely open fire, nice cold drink. Those are all self-care, and shutting out people who want to attack me. Go mute. I'm muting you. A self-care. And learn to breathe. Obviously we all breathe, but learn to breathe effectively. It sounds nuts, doesn't it? Most of us don't breathe to its full potential. Deep, conscious breathing. In, out, and get out into nature, please. Please get out into nature. Nature has the most amazing, soothing impact on us. So all of those things, work on accepting yourself. cultivate relationships, all of those good and wonderful things, and spend time with people who uplift you and bring you peace. And none of this means that you should avoid challenging or problematic relationships. Just know how and where they fit in. And so I don't have a particular quote to end today's show on, other than you are the master or mistress of your own destiny, how you view the world, and it starts from within. Yes, it does. These comments are going in. I'm learning how to breathe right now, says Teresa. Yes, dog walks are so great. Thank you, Hunting. I appreciate that. Inner peace and joy. We are all amazing, and shake it all about. Yes, indeed. I just want to say thank you, as ever, to my two glorious mods, Soul Sound and Crazy Bunny. You're fabulous. Thank you to everybody being here. Thank you to everybody who always responds so wholeheartedly to contacting me about guests, about subject matter. Thank you for all of your live comments today. Thank you, of course, to our wonderful guests. Just thank you, thank you, thank you. And have a wonderful week. And I, of course, will see you on Friday. Be kind to yourself. How do they get the morning newspaper? Is it you still talking about the man in the mountain? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Right. Let me just, great outro. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all. I love you. And I will see you, of course, on Friday. And be careful with yourself. Be very careful with yourself. Time to wake up.
Sonia Poulton.
See you Friday, peeps. Love you all. Take good care of yourself.